Okay, guys, so now topic 2 says focus is on presenting some initial data from the left column above as well as table 2 below. Okay, well, that's a mistake. I should say, well, it's really from the table, so I'll probably correct this before you get to it, but focus is on presenting some initial data from the table 1 above, but it shouldn't say left column, above, as well as table 2 below here. So we'll get to table 2 in a moment, but first I'm going to go ahead and talk about table 2. Okay, topic 2. So here is going to be another paragraph. Oh, okay, I said I would add some information about all of the paragraphs. So another requirement that applies to all of the paragraphs, write this down where you're keeping notes about all of your paragraphs, is that you also need to make sure that your answers are not some answers are just, there's not much you can do with them. They're trivial facts, like 2 plus 2 is 4. How could, we're not going to get very deep about that. But you do want to show some depth. I want to see engagement for that A level, like outstanding engagement and levels of precision. If you're going for B, I still need to see a lot of engagement. And C, I need to see that at least you were really trying to show me some effort and engagement. If it seems like you were just answering questions, like each question was just a survey and a short answer item, and you're not trying to connect the dots within the paragraph, then you're going to end up with not such a very good grade, even if you answer all the questions. So this brings me to the point that your paragraphs need to be compelling, coherent, and fluid. I need to see how what you say in one sentence leads you to say, or moves you to say, or causes you to say, or connects, or if you're making a point of contrast, why you're contrasting something. So I need to feel that you are engaged, that you're wording things in a way that is compelling, and that you're trying to make it easy for me to go from one point to the next. Introductory clauses and statements, transitional statements and clauses. Look those up. Make sure you use them correctly when you look them up. Okay, so that's an added requirement. All right, so now you're watching this video here. Let's go through the questions and then I will elaborate and state some more things. So what do you notice about your scores? So when I say scores, I am referring to the scores here, where you got your foundational lessons, right, with respect to arguments, and then here, where you actually applied the foundational lessons with respect to arguments. So we're looking at 2 tables of scores, and I actually break this down into different sets of scores to help you with your analysis and your observation. So you might not be able to do it right away, but either by the end of the lecture or by the end of creating your paragraph, you might think of a good sentence to have as your topic sentence to introduce the paragraph. What is the purpose of this paragraph? You can say the purpose of this paragraph is to, or the point of this paragraph, or you can say in this paragraph, I'm going to focus on blank. Okay, so maybe you can figure out what that missing word is at the end of those phrases for some kind of topical sentence for that if you're going for the A level, answer. So what do you mean? What do you notice about your score? So notice that I could have just left you there hanging, some of you might say, but I'm here as your coach. I'm here to give you missing requirements and strategies and tips. Questions are part of that. So you need to make sure that you're paying attention to the details of the questions. What was the average score for week 4 task 2B and week 5 task 1A? So you go back up here, 2B, 5-1A. So notice I'm having you give me the average for only 2 items, not all of them, and not even consecutive. Notice that I'm asking first for the average that has to do with your scores on argument modules, because I want you to get a picture of how you did with respect to the argument modules. Now, I was going to do this lesson. This was supposed to be a soft talk module, but I decided to keep it as just videos and a Blackboard, submission of notes. So I might call this a soft talk module in the gradebook, but that's not what it is. In any case, the first question asks you to focus just on these 2 things right here. And now that I'm going through this video, I realize I'm going to have to change this a little bit. Am I going to change it a little bit? No, I'm not. So, no, I am. Because this also had lessons. So this had foundational lessons about, complex arguments like definitions and stuff like that. So by the time you get to this prompt, I'm going to have what was the average score for week 4 task 2B, week 5 task 1A, and week 6 task 1C. Why? Because these provided foundational lessons on concepts and based on concepts and methods and skills that you needed to develop and apply later in the semester. You might even incorporate what I said. By the way, if you incorporate what I say, make sure that if you quote me even 3 words or 5 words in a row consecutively, if you repeat what I say, that you quote and you say Dr. C said. Otherwise, you need to paraphrase, but still say as Dr. C said. Because again, plagiarism, intended, not intended. I'm very strict about that, especially towards the end of the semester for 10% of your grade. So yes, so I'm going to ask for your average. So you'll get all 3 scores. And this might sound like it's not needed, but I actually had a student that I asked for the average, and all she did was list out her scores. So if you have 100 for each of these, so what you do is you get your 3 scores, you add them up. So let's say you just made a 50 in all 3. So you add up 53 times, so that's what, 150. And then to get the average, you divide by the number of assignments that you added up the scores for. So if I have 150, when I add all the scores for 3 assignments, and I divide it by 3, the number of assignments that I added up the scores of, then the average is what? 50. Now that's pretty obvious. If you got hundreds on everything, then you got 300 total, divided by 3 is 100. That was your average for those 3 assignments. But of course, if your numbers are quite different from each other or only close, the averages are going to be different. You'll have to do the math. If you don't know how to do an average, you can Google how do I figure out the average of something mathematically, and it will show you how to do that. Okay, so again, something you might want to include is that why am I even getting you to look at the averages for just those tasks? Because I want you to see how you performed in trying to make sense of arguments like a philosopher. How well did you master the lessons as you work through them at that point of time? How well did you do in getting the basic information down that I would later lecture on, demonstrate, and have you apply? All right, so then I asked for what was your average score for week 4, task 2E, and week 5, task 1C. As weird as this sounds, I'm going to add again week 6, task 1C. So this time you are going to go to this one, and this one. The reason why you're going to include this one twice is because this one's kind of a combination. This one included like the foundational lessons, like the argument modules in week 4, task 2B, and week 5, task 1A, but it also had video demonstration, like week 4, task 2E, and week 5, task 1C. So yes, we're going to count it twice. All right, so then, and so look at the information in here that I said would be important. So if you're going for the A-level response, you might have a sentence before you give me the average that says, the average I'm about to present is for this task, and this task. You can just use, week 4, task 2E, and so on, and say, these items focused on, or provided, blah, blah, blah. You could say provided video-based lessons, demonstrations, and guided practice in light of what I learned in terms of the first soft talk module. You could add a detail saying, these averages are for my notes that I took while I was supposed to be following the videos. Don't say it exactly like that. Put it in your own words. All right. So in other words, you can explain what it is you're giving the average for. So yeah, it might be for, task 2E, week 5, task 1C, and week 6, task 1C. But what was the gist of those things? What was the point of those things? What was the point of those assignments? That's for the A-level response, to add that kind of detail. In any case, make sure you give me the correct average. And like I said, I will have added, by the time you get to this video, I will have added another thing here. So that's a missing requirement, because in the template, I don't have that corrected. So you need to correct in your template. You need to add, you can type in that you also need to include the average for week 6, task 1C here, and add that you need to include the average for week 6, task 1C here. Okay, so here's another spot where you could be inaccurate. If you don't add that correction, include that in your averages, then your response will get dinged for accuracy. Okay, so then notice that I say, what was your average score for week 6, task 2B? If you go up here, you can see that the entries end with week 6, task 1C. That means you need to come down here to this table. In another video, I'm going to go over the information here and the how and why I've organized it the way that I have. But make sure you're looking at the right spot for that. So week 6, task 2B, right there. Week 10, task 1B, right there. You're going to put this, so I'll go over that in a minute. I'm just saying this is where you'll get the information from. So, hold on. Let's see. Yes. So here, I could actually see this one right here being 2 paragraphs. You'll probably have a paragraph for the first 2 averages if you are providing contextual information, like what those assignments were about, like just the gist of the assignments, maybe a little bit of detail, but then you might have a separate paragraph for the average that has to do with the information from this side of this column, where you actually applied what you learned with respect to here. I do ask for that average, and you can provide the gist of what kind of assignments were those, what did you have to do more or less basically in those assignments, what did they consist of, you can write 2 or 3 sentences. And then you could even have a third paragraph, and I think these would be like maybe, shorter paragraphs, so like this one might be a fourth or a third of a page, this one might be a fourth of a third of a page, this one might be like a third of a page, if you have a separate paragraph for that. And it would make sense to have this as its own paragraph if you have these as separate paragraphs. If you're just going for like a C, maybe even a B, and you're not elaborating a lot or contextualizing a lot, then it could be possible that you only have 1 paragraph. That said, here's something to write down for paragraph expectations. If you have a paragraph that is longer than, let's say, 8 lines or half a page, create a new paragraph, create 2 paragraphs. One thing that I look for is to see that you can chunk your information into logical units, and I do not like to read paragraphs that are more than half a page or 8 lines or so. Well, let's say 10 lines. Okay, so to what extent do you think your performance for the assignments noted in Table 1 impacted your performance for the assignments noted in the left column of Table 2? So here you are drawing from the data in this table the foundational lessons, demonstrations, and practice of concepts that you would apply throughout the semester here in analyzing your own opinions, your own arguments. So I'm asking you to think about it. So let's say that you got very low grades on all, I'm just using an example, okay? Everybody's different. But let's say you got very low grades. Do you have a lot of low grades here and a lot of low grades here? Well, then tease out what's the connection. Why in a couple of sentences would low grades here result in low grades here? And so you can look for information and ideas of what to say by looking at the gist and the summary. But of course, this is partly subjective and interpretive. It's partly speculative. You've got to use your imagination or your reflection, your introspection to try to make sense of, how your scores here relate to your scores here. And really, you're using that. You could either focus on the scores or the averages. Because here I use performance. And so the idea is by having you look at your scores, by giving me averages, you're able to think about your performance generally. So you're comparing your performance on foundational lessons, learning the basics through examples and note-taking and whatnot, and then how that impacted you here. And it might be mixed. Some of you might have more to say, some of you might have less to say. But when I look at what you say and I look at your tables, I should find what you say compelling. You can't just make up stuff without looking at the tables or without looking at your averages. You need to look at all of it and bring it all together.